What's going on, everyone? I'm back here with another video, and today I'm going to be giving you guys my full review of the Nikon D810 DSLR camera. So I've had it for about a month now, and feel that I can give you guys a pretty good review. So, yeah, let's go ahead and get started. So I'm going to go ahead and start by running down the technical specs real quick, and giving you guys a quick overview of some of the main bullet points this camera offers. So first and foremost, it is a 36 megapixel CMOS sensor that is built into the camera. That is also full frame, so it is a full frame camera that is not DX. So this is a pro grade camera. And the sensor size is 35 millimeter by 24 millimeter, so it is the full 35 millimeter format, which is very nice. So you would, of course, want to see that on a pro level DSLR. And you do have the option of something called RAW Small if you're someone that shoots in RAW. So you can do either RAW Large or RAW Small. And basically what RAW Small does is it reduces the file size significantly, so you're not taking up a ton of storage space. Continuous shooting mode can give you up to 5 frames a second in the full resolution 14-bit RAW. And then you can get up to 7 frames a second in DX mode shooting in JPEG. So frames per second you can get with this camera is 7 frames a second, which is not too bad. The ISO range is ISO 64 to 12,800 natively. Then you can expand it all the way up to 51,200, or you can expand it below ISO 64 down to ISO 32, just in those situations that you might need a lower ISO to compensate for a very bright scene. And for the pictures that I've taken in the native ISO range, so I've taken a picture at 12,800, and it actually is not that bad. Of course, you're going to have some noise in the image, but from what I was seeing, the camera actually handles the high noise and high ISO really well. And the camera can also record HD video at 1080p 60 frames a second. And you do also have 720p at 60 frames a second for those that want to have a lower resolution to save on storage space. And one thing the camera is missing is built-in Wi-Fi. So unfortunately, this camera does not have Wi-Fi built in, meaning you cannot wirelessly transfer photos from the camera to a smartphone for sharing. So unfortunately, you cannot be able to do that. Unfortunately, now if you want to have that feature or that functionality, I would recommend picking up, say, the Nikon D750. It too is also a full frame camera that also has Wi-Fi built in. So for those of you that need Wi-Fi, that would be probably your camera of choice. And the highest shutter speed that you can get with the camera is 0.008 of a second, which is really nice. That is something that you come to see more often on pro level DSLRs. On lower end models, you usually see between 2,000th and 4,000th of a second. Generally, that's kind of the range that you'll see on a DX camera or a more consumer grade. But yeah, 0.008 of a second is really nice to have for those situations that you need to capture for sports or something like that. And it does have the Nikon Expeed 4 processor, which essentially is what is powering the camera and processing all of the images. And that is what is essentially allowing the images to have low noise. So if you're using a high ISO, that Expeed 4 processor is processing the images to render them with the lowest noise possible. Now, it is kind of an older version of the processor. Nikon, I believe, currently has an Expeed 5 out currently, which is definitely better than the Expeed 4. And then the focusing system, the focus points rather, you have up to 51 points with 15 cross-type sensors. And then you have something called group area autofocus, which basically uses the 4 center focus points in conjunction with each other, and it allows you to focus on subjects, or moving subjects rather, much easier than with a single point. And then lastly, the battery that the camera comes with is the ENEL15, and it is a 1900 milliamp battery that it should give you roughly about 1200 shots on a full charge, which is actually pretty decent considering. But I would always recommend picking up extra batteries so you're not stuck in a situation without battery power. So anyway, that is the main technical specs. So let's go ahead and move on to the hardware of the camera. Outside. So let's start with the back here. So starting with the display, you have a 3.2-inch diagonal LCD display. It is not touchscreen, unfortunately, and it is not articulating. So you cannot rotate the screen around to get a different angle. So the screen is fixed in one location and is not touchscreen. So those are some sacrifices that you might have to make if you want to get this camera. Then over here you have the OK button for selecting certain items in the menu. Then we have the magnifying glass button, essentially zoom in and out right here. Then we have the lock button, which also doubles as the help button to give you quick access to certain menu tips. Then we have the menu button that gets you access to your settings. We have the picture preview, delete, auto exposure, and autofocus lock, AF on, which basically activates the autofocus. Then we have our main command dial, our D-pad, which also has a lock on it. So if you don't want to have accidental inputs, you can hit the lock like so, and it will not allow the focus point to be moved while shooting. So you don't change that by accident. And then right here we have a speaker, which is pretty loud. It could be louder, but it is pretty decent. Then we have the I button that allows you to get quick access to certain menu settings. So as you can see here, you press it and you can change some quick settings here. Then down here we have the live view toggle. So you press that and it'll go into live view mode. And then you also have video mode, so you have this little toggle here to switch between photo and video modes for live view, which is pretty nice. Click that and it goes back. And then we have info, which basically brings up the info screen so you can see all of your settings on the back LCD, which isn't really necessary considering this camera has two LCD screens, one on the back, which is the main one, and then one up on the top, which I'll get to in just a minute. And then up here on top we have our viewfinder, which is 100% coverage, so you can get the most view coverage out of the viewfinder as possible. And it is very bright as well, so when looking through the viewfinder, it is very bright, and you can definitely see everything that is going on, which is a very, very nice thing to have. And then next to that, you have a viewfinder cover. As you can see here, you could do that, and it closes it. Basically, what that's used for is to prevent light leakage into the sensor from doing a long exposure. And it also helps keep dust out of the viewfinder as well if you happen to be in a dusty environment. So really nice there. Moving to the top, we have the hot shoe mount. Over here we have the command dial, which has a few extra buttons on it. You have white balance control, quality control, metering modes, as well as the changing of the ISO. And then you have a little button next to it that allows you to rotate the mode dial, so you can switch between single shooting mode, continuous low, continuous high, quiet mode, quiet continuous, timer mode, as well as mirror up mode. So you get several different options there, really quick access. And then over here we have the diopter for the viewfinder. So you can see here you have this little dial here, so you could pull it out and then rotate it and have it focus the viewfinder in the situations if you are someone that has eyeglasses and you need to have the viewfinder be focused for your particular eye. And then over here we have that second LCD that I was talking about earlier, and this is the one you're going to probably want to use the majority of the time because turning on that back LCD, it actually uses quite a bit of battery power. So when only using this one, you're saving quite a bit of battery, and that is a much needed thing when you're shooting a lot of pictures. But basically this little LCD allows you to see a lot of settings on here, so you can see your shutter speed, aperture, the exposure, the battery life, all those basic things, and like that. So you can see all those quick things from there. And then you can also hit this here, which allows you to illuminate the display so you can see it in a dark room, which is really nice. Anyway, moving on. So above this, you have a mode button, which allows you to change your mode. So you have manual, program auto, shutter priority, and aperture priority. Now, the thing that this camera does not have is a full auto mode. So for those that are just beginning with photography and are not fully familiar with a lot of camera settings, this camera has absolutely no full auto mode at all. Now, you do have that program auto, which is kind of a full auto, but you still have to change some things manually, such as the metering modes and white balance and things like that. So yeah, and it has no scene selections, no sport modes, nothing of that. So if you buy this camera, you need to be familiar with how to use and change some of the settings. I would not recommend this camera for a beginner just starting out in photography, because it is definitely something that you have to get used to and kind of play around with. Anyway, moving on, we have right here the record button for video when you're in live view, and then we have the exposure compensation button, and then the on and off switch, as well as the main shutter button for focusing and taking a picture. Moving on to the left side, we have a couple little doors here. So the top one is your microphone and headphone jack. Down here you have your USB port for connecting to your computer. And then you have lastly an HDMI port, a mini HDMI port actually. It's not full size, unfortunately, but yeah, you can connect this to an HDTV or an external video recorder if you're going to record video for long periods of time. Then moving over here onto the right side, we have our memory card slot. So if we open up this, you can see we have an SD card slot as well as a CF card. So it is a dual card slot camera, so you can put 2 cards in it and basically shoot in redundant mode, which basically means you can back up your images to 2 separate cards at once. So if any of the 1 cards fail, you'll always have a backup on hand, just to make sure you do not lose any of your images. On one real quick note, I forgot to mention in the beginning, this camera is weather sealed, so you can use it in situations that are not particularly ideal, such as light rain or some mist or humid weather, very dusty environments, things like that. So you should be able to use it in those situations just fine. But you do need to have a lens that also is weather sealed. So you don't want to use an unweather sealed lens, because then you'll screw up your lens if you use it in rain. So yeah, just be aware of that. But anyway, moving on. Moving to the front now, we have the couple more little rubber doors here. And basically, the bottom one here is for your shutter release cable. But anyway, right here we have our focusing button, so you can switch from manual and autofocus. And then the button in the center allows you to change the focus mode. So you can change it from AFC as well as AFS. And then we have the flash compensation button, the auto bracketing button, and as well as the flash. So you can press this and it pops the flash up, which is nice, pretty handy. And that is another thing. Most pro-level DSLRs do not have a built-in flash nowadays, so it's really nice to see that this one does indeed still have a built-in flash for those that want to use that. And then right here we have our lens release button, so you can press that to release the lens. And then on this side we have the little focusing LED light that basically allows the camera to focus better in a low light situation. And then we have our stereo microphone, so you have one on the left as well as one on the right here as well. And then on this side you have the second command dial, so you have 2 command dials. The rear one controls the shutter speed and the front one controls the aperture. And then down here in the grip, it's kind of hard to see, you have a function button as well as a preview button, which are both customizable. So you can basically customize either of those buttons to whatever you would like. So if you want the function button to be an aperture or an ISO control button, or if you want to change the area mode from DX or FX, or change the metering mode, whatever have you, you can easily do that and map any of those functions to either of those 2 buttons, which is really handy. Alright, so moving to the bottom now, We have our battery compartment. So if I open up this here, this is where you put the ENEL15 battery into. And then right here we have a little flap again. You take that off, and that is where you would connect the Nikon battery grip to the camera, so you can get extra battery power by connecting that right here, which is super, super handy. Again, I would really recommend picking that up. It's always nice to have. Then right here, lastly, you have your 1/4-inch tripod screw. Now, to give a quick comparison to a more consumer-grade DSLR, I'm going to bring in this here. This here is the Nikon D5500, which is a DX format camera. And it is actually significantly smaller than the D810. I believe the D5500 only weighs about 1 pound, whereas the D810 weighs about 2 to 2.5 pounds without a lens attached. If you add a lens into the equation, it could weigh up to about 4 to 5 pounds, give or take, on whichever lens you end up putting on it. So, in terms of travel and portability, the D5500 is hands down the winner in that situation, because, as you can see, the size is significantly different. So, as you can see here, the size difference is pretty dramatic. The D5500 is way, way smaller and a lot more compact compared to the D810. But a lot of pro-level DSLRs, you kind of come to expect that. Because if you have a full-frame sensor, that means the mirror on the inside for the viewfinder also has to be significantly larger to match the size of the sensor. So, given the fact that the D5500 has a DX sensor, the sensor itself is significantly smaller than that of a full-frame. So, because of that, the camera body can be significantly smaller. Which is actually really, really good. So for those that want to travel and carry around a relatively small camera, this would be the one to go for. And again, if you're just beginning in photography and you're starting out, this would be the one I would say to go for over the D810, because the D810 is, like I said, a much more pro-grade camera with absolutely no auto modes. But yeah, to basically give my overall thoughts on the D810, I absolutely love it. I would highly recommend it to pretty much anyone, but again, like I said, to those just starting out, it would probably be not the best camera for you. Giving the price is about $2,800 for just the camera body itself without a lens. So you add a lens in there, you're looking at least about $3,500 in the end. So yeah, so for starters, would recommend it. But for anyone else that is an amateur or a pro or an advanced amateur, whatever, whoever you are, this camera would be an absolute perfect match for most people. But anyway, so yeah, that's basically it for this full review. Hope you guys have enjoyed. I do have several other videos coming out relating to the D810, so stay tuned for that. But yes, I hope you guys have enjoyed this video. It's kind of turned out to be a relatively long one, but I think I covered most of the bullet points in regards to the camera. And yeah, so hope you guys have enjoyed once again. Make sure to hit that subscribe button right down below. It's greatly appreciated. Hit that thumbs up button as well. That's also greatly appreciated. And if you guys have any questions, comments, or need help, whatever have you, drop a comment below and I will get back to them as soon as I possibly can. So yeah, again, with that all being said, hope you guys have enjoyed and I will see you guys in the next one. Peace out.